Pedro Ferraz was the kind of man who commanded respect with the mere sound of his footsteps. A millionaire widower, owner of a technology giant, surrounded by awards and numbers, but empty inside. Since the day Camila left during Antonella's birth, he locked himself in a silent world where affection was replaced by rigid routines and cold walls. It was the classic portrait of a cold man who learns to love, but still not knowing that this love would return. While his company grew, Pedro withered. Antonella, his motherless daughter, was raised by temporary nannies and expensive toys, but nothing filled the space of touch, of listening, of connection. It was AU alone on paper, but distant in practice. That lack of real connection made him increasingly inaccessible. The touching family drama was not in the headlines, but between the lines of his life. And it is in this scenario that life decides to whisper, there is still time to emotional healing. But will he listen? If you're already enjoying this story, subscribe to the channel now and leave a comment with your thoughts so far. This will help us bring you more exciting stories like this. The list of nannies dismissed by Pedro already seemed like a secret dossier. None of them resisted his invisible test, the one that demanded the impossible, to take Camilla's place. But the routine changes when he, tired and absent, leaves the responsibility in the hands of Valeria. And that's how Marina enters the scene, with a worn backpack, a firm gaze, and a serenity that didn't ask permission to impress. She was the new nanny, but it felt like something more. Valeria felt it right away. Marina had something different. It wasn't about her resume. It was about her presence. She was the kind of woman who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. The house, plunged into the silence of absence, barely knew it, but it had just received the nanny who would change everything. And even without pomp or promises, that first step would be the beginning of an exciting story, made of unexpected encounters, restrained glances, and a transformation that only time would reveal. Antonella was not the type to give in easily. After so many exchanges, she quickly learned to build walls. But when she saw Marina for the first time, she didn't need words. The connection was silent, but powerful. With a simple, "Can I sit with you?" Marina won more than just space on the carpet. She gained entry into a little heart that only asked for a real presence. It was the beginning of a true emotional bond, built at the girl's pace, without haste, without imposition. In the days that followed, the new nanny, she didn't try to take up too much space. She read books on the floor, cooked with Antonella, laughed softly. She offered what Pedro no longer knew how to give: affection without demands, attention without judgment. It was there in that childlike universe that one of the most beautiful forms of family reconnection. While Pedro remained away, something inside his daughter began to blossom. And Marina, little by little, showed that the love that heals can disguise itself as simplicity. Across the ocean, Pedro maintained the habit of controlling everything, even from a distance. His messages were always objective. Is Antonella eating well? Did she sleep alone? Did she ask about me? But Valeria's response began to come with more than cold data. She described simple scenes: Marina cooking for the girl, the two of them painting together on the floor, muffled laughter in the living room. Small details, but what shook the defenses of a cold man who was beginning to feel again. Those words, which had previously seemed routine, now echoed in a different way. It was as if, without realizing it, Pedro was being pulled back, not by the pain of the past, but by the life that was happening without him. The new nanny, with her calm and firm manner, not only took care of Antonella, she awakened what he thought was buried. And there, even without seeing it with his own eyes, Pedro began to understand that perhaps the reconstructed family that he thought impossible was being formed right there, in front of him, in the living room of his own house. Pedro returned without warning. They had cancelled his last meeting in Lisbon, and he, on impulse, boarded the first flight. When he opened the door to the penthouse, he expected silence, as always, but he found something he hadn't heard in a long time: laughter. Antonella was laughing out loud, her face smeared with chocolate, sitting at the kitchen counter. Beside her, Marina was improvising a cake with flour on her apron and a clumsy spatula. That simple image disarmed everything. His heart trembled. It was raw, unfiltered affection. For a moment he just watched, motionless, touched by a scene that seemed like something out of a movie, but was his life. What he had buried, the ability to feel, to smile, to want to be there, reappeared without asking permission. The widowed millionaire, always shielded by routines and walls, was crossed by a heat that did not come from the oven. It came from presence, from Nanny, who changed everything. He didn't say anything right away, but I knew right then and there. That love after loss, it wasn't a betrayal of memory. It was a new beginning. Marina didn't need to change the decor of the house to transform it. She just had to spread flour on the counter, leave a candle lit during dinner, and listen carefully to Antonella. Little by little, that luxurious and silent environment began to gain sounds, the smell of simple food and the colors of childhood. Pedro observed everything from a distance, trying to understand what he was feeling. There was something different, a feeling that was both disturbing and good at the same time. It was as if the house was breathing again. He found himself listening to his daughter's laughter, Marina's light footsteps, the clink of dishes. Everything was new and familiar. The solo father, who had lived on autopilot for years, was beginning to feel, really feel, and this was unsettling him. How could someone so ordinary to the outside world cause a revolution from within? The truth is that reconciliation with the past, sometimes it doesn't start with therapy, but with a simple gesture, like a hot tea or a bedtime story. And Pedro, without knowing how, was already living a story of new beginnings. That night, dinner was rice, vegetables, and grilled fish that smelled like Grandma's house. In the center of the table, a lit candle, simple but welcoming. Marina remembered not to use cilantro because Valeria said he didn't like it. A silly detail, maybe, but in a home where everything was so impersonal, this small gesture had the weight of a hug. Pedro, without saying anything, felt a lump in his chest. That was what he missed, even without knowing it, of the invisible touch of care. These gestures, almost imperceptible, began to repeat themselves. A tea at the right time. A drawing on the refrigerator made by Antonella with 3 people. One of them was him. Small scenes that reconfigured the scenery of the house and of the heart. Pedro realized that the new nanny, without invading its space, already occupied parts of it that had been empty for a long time. It was an unexpected romance, but it began like all true love, with a look, with listening, with presence. And in the silence between them, something screamed, "You are no longer alone." It was dawn when Pedro, shaken by a nightmare, found Marina on the couch with a book on her lap. Without any formality, he sat down next to her and confided, "There are days when I think I wasn't born for this, to be a father." He wasn't looking for advice, he just needed to be heard, and Marina understood. Without trying to fix anything, he calmly said, "Antonella doesn't need a perfect father. She needs you to be present." That simple speech was like a balm to a calloused heart. The widowed millionaire, accustomed to controlling everything, felt lost in what he could not calculate. Love, grief, guilt. But Marina, with her unpretentious empathy, did not try to erase his pain. She simply shared the burden. This exchange, between 2 scarred adults, planted the seeds of something greater, emotional healing, reconnection with the now. Because sometimes the greatest proof of affection is not offering answers, but staying, even when the other person is falling apart. Antonella's 5th birthday party seemed perfect. Colorful cake, friends from school, soft music, and Marina coordinating everything with ease. Pedro, enchanted, watched from afar until Renato arrived. Marina's old friend, a nurse, kind and smiling. A simple gift in his hands, a loving hug and easy laughter, and that's when Pedro stopped. A strange discomfort grew in his chest. It was jealousy, For the first time, he was not the only center of that connection. Pedro tried to hide it, but he couldn't. He went upstairs, locked himself in his office, mulling over something he couldn't even name. When Marina went after him, the conversation was direct. "Are you jealous?" He didn't deny it. He just looked away. He was disconcerted because this kind of touching family drama, he couldn't handle it. The truth was that Marina had become more than just a nanny. She was a living presence in his life, and now he had to decide whether he would fight for it or let it slip away again. Marina was not one to beat around the bush. With calm firmness, she faced Pedro. "I'm here because I chose to be, not because I erased who I was before you." She was direct, without drama. She wasn't a blank page ready to be rewritten. She had a past, friends, scars, and all of that was part of what made her whole. The simple woman, which seemed discreet, showed the strength of someone who knew what was worth it and what he no longer accepted to negotiate. Pedro, still confused by his own feelings, saw a mirror there. He realized that it was not enough to feel. It took courage to stay, to build. Marina was not interested in filling a void, but rather in living something real, with presence and truth. From that moment on, he understood. If he wanted that story to continue, he would need to grow. Because true love does not require the other to be nullified. It adds to the other. And at that moment, Pedro began to see the woman beside him for real. The kiss happened like a sudden rush, full of hesitation, surrender, and silences that spoke volumes. It was real, intense, full of memories of what could have been and what still frightened him. But soon after, old Pedro came, withdrawn, rational, walled off. He pulled away, afraid that it was all just neediness or confusion. And Marina, despite being shaken, did not beg for answers. She understood that a love that is born of fear does not flourish. The next day, she packed her backpack and went up to her office with an uneasy calm. "I don't want to be a doubt in your life," she said. It was her way of preserving what dignity she still had. The nanny who changed everything, now she was moving away so as not to be the shadow of a broken story. Pedro tried to hold her with words, but they came too late. And Marina, with a heavy heart, left, not for lack of feeling, but for understand that starting over requires reciprocity. Marina's departure was like turning off the sound system in the house. The silence, which had been comfortable for Pedro before, was now unbearable. Antonella asked about her every day. On the third day, she cried herself to sleep. Pedro sat on the edge of his daughter's bed, feeling the weight of emptiness in a different way. It wasn't just Marina's absence. It was the absence of everything she brought: joy, effective routine, hope. The house, previously warm, had become cold again. Pedro tried to convince himself that it was better this way, that distancing himself was safer. But I couldn't sleep anymore. Marina's chair, empty at the table, the sound of her voice, absent in the hallways. He missed everything. The simple conversations, the smell of the cake, the way she folded Antonella's blanket. The transformation through love had happened, but he only realized it when he was left without it. Now it was too late. Or maybe not. Valeria, who had always observed everything discreetly, could no longer remain silent. When she saw Pedro staring at a photo of Antonella, she blurted out, "Marina was a breath of fresh air in this house, Pedro, and you let that air escape." It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation. She had known her boss for years, and she had never seen him as alive as he was during his days with Marina. It wasn't about overwhelming passion. It was about peace, about belonging, about healing grief. Pedro didn't answer right away, but those words stuck with him. He was silent for the rest of the day. He reviewed old messages. He felt the emptiness that he had previously thought safe now become suffocating. He understood for the first time that the biggest mistake was not feeling, it was pretending not to feel, and that letting Marina go would perhaps be giving up not only her, but the chance to build a family, truly, imperfectly, yes, but truly. Before the sun rose, Pedro was already in the car. He drove through the still, empty streets until he reached the simple neighborhood that Marina had mentioned. When he saw the crooked potted plants on the porch and a child's bicycle leaning against the wall, he knew he was in the right place. When she opened the door, surprised and barefoot, he said directly, "I didn't come on impulse, I came by choice." He was no longer the cold man who hid his emotions. He was someone ready to rebuild himself. Pedro told her everything, about the fear, the longing, how much she was missed. He said he didn't want Antonella to remember her as a phase, that he didn't want to pretend anymore, that he loved her. Marina, still with her heart on guard, listened to every word, until Antonella appeared sleepy and ran into her father's arms. He looked at Marina and said, "If we go together, I'll come back." And it was at that moment that family reconnection happened, not like before, but like a new beginning, like truth. Pedro didn't make a rehearsed speech. He said with a choked but firm voice, "I love you. I don't know if I'll always get it right, but I want to learn from you in our time." It was a real surrender, devoid of pride or perfection. A man once broken by loss, now willing to rebuild with care. And Marina, with tears in her eyes, responded with something more powerful than any promise. "If we go together, I'll come back." There was no longer a nanny or a boss. There was a conscious choice to meet as people. Hurt, yes, but open to love. It was the true story of a new beginning. A family rebuilt, not for convenience, but for affection, for courage, for the decision to stay, even knowing that the road would have curves. Because sometimes the deepest love is born not from perfection, but from the willingness to care for each other's cracks, with patience. The house was no longer the same. It was still silent, but now it had another sound, the sound of peace. Antonella ran through the hallways in her butterfly dress, while Marina set the coffee table. Pedro watched everything with a shy smile. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and sometimes that's worth more. They were together, with fears, with flaws, but with a new chance to be a family. No one promised it would be easy, but there was presence, there was affection, there was emotional healing happening in small actions. It was the kind of transformation that you can't see from the outside, but that you feel in the look, in the care, in the comfortable silence between two people who chose each other. A touching story, made of pain and rebirth. A reminder that love doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be true. How many times has life put people in our path who seemed simple, but who had the power to change everything? And have you ever, out of fear or pride, let someone who just wanted to stay slip away? This story is not just about a widowed millionaire, a new nanny, or a motherless daughter. It's about all of us, about how much we carry unhealed pain, and how true love, even when it arrives unexpectedly, can be the bridge between what we were and what we can still be. Now I ask you, have you ever experienced a love that cured you of something that seemed incurable? When was the last time someone simple changed your entire life? If this story also touched you, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications and leave your comment below. Your participation not only helps this content reach more people, but also inspires other beautiful stories to come to life. And who knows, the next story we tell here might not be yours.